Sanibonani, good evening, Dumela, and welcome to episode 275 of the Private Property Podcast. I'm your host, Uzamantungwa Kumalo. If you're joining us for the first time, welcome to the only daily property talk show in South Africa, helping you navigate your property journey. And to all our regular viewers at home, welcome back. You know how we do every single weekday at 7 p.m. You and I have an appointment where I'm always in conversation with an expert guest who helps us in making better property decisions. It doesn't matter whether you're a tenant, a landlord, you're looking to buy, to sell, or to build. This is a show that helps you along your journey. And talking about helping you along your journey, you can, of course, tune into the whole host of other shows that we have across Private Property's social media platforms. As it is a Tuesday, later on this evening at 8 p.m., you can look forward to award-winning farmer Umbali Noko bringing you the Farming Podcast. And I know it's episode 63. She's going to be looking at farming in a cooperative. And I think this is one of those topics that I'm quite keen on, because you don't always have to go at it alone, whether it's in property or certainly in farming. There are different ways to access farming and agriculture, and a cooperative is one of those ways that you can do so. She'll be in conversation with Ipeleng Kwadi, who's an owner of Matsobela Farming and Enterprise. So you can look forward to that at 8 p.m. with Umbali Nwoko. Of course, she also comes to your screens every Thursdays at 8 p.m. as well. So that show certainly does cater to all of your agricultural needs. I've actually now I'm starting to, do my own veggie garden. I finally have a garden that I can tend to. So we'll be starting to, plant a few things during this winter season. Hopefully by the time spring comes, I can eat from my actual garden, which is going to be fantastic. We've already got, a fruit tree. We've got peaches that we are able to get here. We used to have grapes, but unfortunately we didn't take care of the grape tree that well. So I'm quite excited about my own, home farming adventure. I'll definitely keep you all updated on my social media platforms. That's at Zamantungwa_K on Twitter as well as on Instagram. Now, of course, the other shows that you can look forward to here on Private Property is the First Time Home Buy show that comes to your screens every single Wednesdays at 8 p.m. C. Clarkson brings you that show where she's always in conversation with people who have walked that first time home buying journey and then have gone on to grow their property portfolio from strength to strength. And every Mondays and Fridays, Chad brings you the Home Shoppers show, where he gives us an exclusive tour of some of Joburg and certainly South Africa's greatest properties. And those, of course, are properties you can find on our website. That's www.privateproperty.co.za. Well, to kickstart this evening's conversation, I know that we said we wanted to bring you episode 275 from Black Break. We had a minor change in plans, but don't worry, we're always, of course, going to certainly give you quality shows every single weekday here on the Private Property Podcast, as we always do, and deliver we will. This evening, we're going to be looking at the importance of schedule and valuation of replacement values. I know that's a mouthful. We'll explore what exactly is that, right? And this is particularly applicable to people who are, in community schemes. And I say particularly, it isn't only for that. We're going to be speaking to somebody who needs no introduction. We have them quite regularly. When we speak insurance, we always, bring him on board. And that is, of course, Mike Addison, who's the owner at Addsure. Mike, good evening, and thank you so much for joining us.
Good evening. Great to be here again.
It's only a pleasure to have you, Mike. So I did say it's quite a mouthful. When you look at the schedule and valuation of replacement values, just saying that is quite a lot. What is that? Before we even look at the importance and what could happen if, you don't have your ducks in a row where that is concerned, what exactly is it?
Okay, so it's actually two things. So we can actually break them down into two words, make it a bit easier. The valuation, first of all, is a valuation that a body corporate and an HRA, so I don't think HRA shouldn't have it done. HRAs and body corporates should have a valuation done every 3 years or so. And it has, in fact, it's statutory for a body corporate to have a valuation done at least every 3 years. What is a valuation exactly? An independent valuer will come around and you do a walk around properly, maybe with measurements, check plans, check what you have, write it all down, and work out what the replacement value is if the buildings were to be totally destroyed. Nothing to do with market value, nothing to do with the value of your place if you want to sell it. It's the cost to put the building back if it's completely destroyed. So that's your valuation. That's the first part. And then the second part, which we call the schedule of replacement values, I shorten it and call it an SRV. So we try and use that shortened word so we don't have to have that mouthful all the time. The SRV is something that the body corporate is obliged to prepare ahead of every annual general meeting. So ahead of an annual general meeting, the body corporate is supposed to prepare the schedule, taking the information from the valuation. If it was done 2 years ago, then working out an escalation and then setting it out so that each owner at the AGM can see what the replacement value of their section and their unit is, more particularly the unit sum insured.
And I think, Mike, one of the things that probably want to, and you've already started pointing it out, when we look at the valuation, part of it, you're saying how this isn't based on market value. It certainly isn't based on if you, for example, as an individual, want to sell your property. Perhaps take us through how that valuation would essentially, what are some of the things that they're looking for? As we're saying that holistically, it's about if the place were to, let's say, burn down or be damaged, how much would it cost to build it all up? But what goes into it? Because I can almost think of some body corporates wanting to potentially do fraud. If you know that especially if you're a small body corporate, I feel like if you're a small body corporate, you're able to get away with making sure your insurance is paid up and up to date and you've updated everything, and then find a way to destroy your property so that things can be redone. And this is obviously me thinking very worst case scenario. I know people wouldn't typically do that, but we've certainly heard a lot of stories of insurance fraud, especially during COVID right now. So the valuation aspect, what actually goes into it? When the valuer comes through, what are they looking at? What are they looking for? We've typically only covered valuations in as far as your particular unit or property is concerned. But here it's for the whole complex or the whole estate. So what actually goes into valuing a property that's potentially that massive and has individual units owned by different people?
Okay, so you can actually apply the same basic principles to your own individual property for that matter. So if somebody has a small house and they want to think about replacement values, the same principles actually apply. It's just done large, in a larger manner with a larger building. That's really all. Same formula. So very typically a replacement value, you're looking at the contract price first of all as a starting point. So the valuer would say, on this typical building, let's call it a normal, let's average everything out and say that it's your typical townhouse complex that you drive down the highway and you drive past all those townhouses. So your typical townhouse complex, you would expect probably an average to be 10,000 Rand per square meter as your average building cost. That seems to be typically average 9, 10, 11,000 Rand per square meter. So your contract building price, that means it costs 10,000 Rand per square meter of your footprint of your house. So if you've got 100 square meters, multiply that by 10,000 Rand, you should come out at your building cost rate per square meter, excluding VAT. That 10,000 Rand would always exclude value added tax. Then they look at that first of all. They're trying to achieve what the replacement costs are. Obviously, they look at your gates and they look at your garages and they look at your squash court or whatever else you might have, and then they would add all of those items. But on the raw building, they would look at the building rate per square meter. Then they would have another line item, which would be your professional fees. So in this complex, to rebuild it, you would need an architect, probably engineers, certainly a quantity surveyor, and those costs are also add costs to your contract price. Then the demolition cost. So assuming that the building is completely destroyed by, say, an earthquake or something terrible that has happened, or a large fire, a house, and then they take other things into account as well, like the escalations, but we're not going to talk about that. So So you have a replacement cost. If your building is completely destroyed, that's the total replacement cost. And then from year to year, that there's building inflation. So next year, say you have your valuation done this year, and building inflation might have been 5% for the year, then you would add 5%, or you would phone the valuer that did it, perhaps, and he might give you the figure. Say that building inflation over the last year is 5%, just add 5%. And then in the third year, you have it done properly again. You call the same guy out, hopefully the same guy, and you ask him to come and freshen it up. And they must walk around and check that there's nothing has deteriorated badly, or there are no extensions or new swimming pools or anything like that. And then, and that's really it. That's the valuation. And I always say to owners, you can check it. If you look at your schedule of replacement values, that's the other one, the SRV. So if you look at your SRV at the AGM, you just see your unit number and you see your section number, and then you see a figure. Might be, 2.5 million rand, or whatever the case might be. I say knock off 30% to account for your VAT, professional fees, demolition, etc., and say per square meter, and then you come and then divide it out, and you should roughly come out at your 10,000 rand a square meter, or what have you. And if it comes out at 5,000 rand a square meter, you're in trouble. And if it comes out at 20,000 rand a square meter, you may well be overinsured. Now, that's not to say 20,000 rand is overinsured, but we do one. We've got one in Clifton. I think it's at 80,000 rand a square meter. So it can be, and those are high-end replacement costs. So and it can jump up very quickly if you start putting in high-end finishes. So it can happen, but normally, I think, you get a feel, well, we certainly would get a feel for what would be normal. But I would say if you're under 8,000 rand a square meter, put your hand up and ask some questions.
And Mark, when we then look at this, what is the importance of ensuring that you have accurate SRV? And certainly, as you say, before we attend AGMs, we send that pack with all these values and the numbers. Why is it important to have accurate figures and of course, up-to-date figures as well? Because I know that not every building, for example, does, or every complex or estate does their evaluations once every 3 years. There's many that probably haven't done any valuation in the past 5, even more years. So why is it important to be on top of this so that you're able to ensure that you're adequately insured?
Yeah, it's actually critical, and I do often see, especially with homeowners associations, it's not actually legislated, or it's not actually in, they're run by their constitutions or their MOI documents. So it depends, they don't have the Sectional Title Schemes Management Act to put in little rules for you to follow. So they tend to say, oh, well, it's nowhere states that we have to, so we're not going to do it. We're just going to work it out ourselves. And I've seen some big dangers. I think I might have alluded to this before in a previous episode, where an HOA goes and thinks that 5 million rand is enough, actually, I can't remember the figures offhand now, but this particular one should have been insured for 21 million, because the layman doesn't realize that under the road that runs through the HOA, there's a lot of civil engineering works, and there's certain formulas that a valuer would use in determining the replacement costs. And when that big flood comes, if you're not insured, you can have a 1 million rand claim, and if you're 5%. If you insured 5% of your value, which I remember was the case, that's right, this particular case was 900,000 rand cover, but they should have been insured for 21 million. That was the figure. There wasn't a claim, luckily. We just picked this up and recommended that they have the valuation done. And had they had a big flood and it had caused a lot of damage, they would have only got paid out 5% of the value of their claim. So a 1 million rand claim, 50,000 rand, there you go. Thank you very much. Off we go. And that's the danger. In a body corporate environment, that large storm that I've alluded to in a couple of the episodes past, that so far is costing 8 million rand odd. and that where 153 units were affected in one storm in Benoni, the centre of Benoni. You might remember 26th, I think it was, February it was. There's a hang of a hailstorm. If anybody listening tonight is from Benoni, I'm sure you will remember that.
Mm.
The effect there was that body corporate had 10 out of 10 for those trustees. I was actually at the AGM where they told the owners, because the owners were also trying to, do we have to spend an extra $3,000 on a valuation? Yes, the trustees said we've been advised to. I nodded my head and said yes, and the trustees pushed it ahead, and they went and had the valuation done. And when the 8 million rand claim came along and the loss adjusters were on site with the QS, they said, valuation done, we're not even going to go there. We're not even going to consider. So we'll pay. So, yeah, it's very important. It just takes away any sort of doubts or question marks at claim stage.
And Mike, I mean, certainly for our viewers at home, I'd be interested to hear from viewers at home if they've ever had issues with their insurance claim for, their property. Doesn't necessarily have to be you're living in a sectional title community, but if you've ever made any claim relating to your property, perhaps some contents, did you ever have any issues with your insurance paying out? And if so, what was the reason that they gave you for not paying out for your particular claim? And Mike, I mean, I'm very curious to find out from you, perhaps share a few examples where, and you've already shared one where the SRVs weren't up to date, and unfortunately a crisis did occur that needed to the complex building estate for substantial work to be done to get it back to where it ought to be. Let's share with our viewers, some examples of how the worst case scenario can actually be. Because the unfortunate thing is you're probably at home, you live in a sectional title community, and in as much as, yes, we are sent these packs every year, I know the reality is the majority of owners don't read them. And sometimes I would even argue, Mike, that the ease of reading some of these documents isn't the easiest, I mean, those of us who are in the built environment or property sector, we find it fairly easy to go through it and spot any red flags as we're reading through it. But unfortunately, ordinary owners wouldn't know how to spot a potential red flag when they are sent that AGM pack. So what are some examples of, I'll say, the worst case scenarios where things were unfortunately not updated? And later on, I certainly want to hear from you around how viewers at home can best empower themselves to know what essentially their standing is in their own community scheme, because I'm sure many people, nobody wants to find themselves, in the middle of a crisis or to find that you are not adequately insured, and especially an insurance premium that was supposed to be paid by, we'll say, somebody else, right? So you are not the one who's not coming off your personal account.
Yeah, I think the thing you want me to answer that. I know you're asking the viewers questions at the same time, so. I think involvement. I've heard this theme a few times. As you know, I'm a keen listener to the podcast when I'm not in meetings myself. I hear people like Lee Maingard and Dave James in the past always saying, get involved, put your hand up, become a trustee or yourself, or go and ask the questions. And the same comes here. You're an owner, and attend those AGMs, even if you at least help them get a quorum. I think that's number one. And realize that insurance isn't something that you only need to scratch when you have a claim. Make sure that it's properly in place. And you're an owner in a scheme. You might be in the typical size, I always average again, 35 to 40 unit scheme seems to be the average size scheme around South Africa. And you might be one of 40 owners, and that you own 1/40th of that whole building, not only your little section, but you actually own the gates. You actually own you own part of that swimming pool, 1/40th of that swimming pool, 1/40th of that driveway. It's yours. So take some responsibility. Don't just think you're living in a hotel. So when you go to an AGM, ask. You can say, I don't see a copy of the valuation being presented here tonight. The rules actually say that the valuation should be presented at the AGM. You don't have to show it all. It's just got to be there. That if somebody wants to go up and have a look at it, they can. the SRV is something that is actually sent out with the AGM pack. And it looks like a real boring list because it's just a list of section numbers and numbers. But just remember, your section number and the far right-hand column is the value that I mentioned just now. Check that 1 million rand, whether you think that's enough. Think about whether in my section, what have you done? Oh no, it's a standard developer's finish. Seems right. 10 or 12,000 rand a square meter. Okay, that's fine. Don't have to ask any questions. But hang on, this is only at 7,000 rand a square meter. And this is quite a new complex. There's something wrong here. And then put your hand up and say, when was a valuation last done? Oh no, we haven't had one done yet. Well, make sure that you get one done. And meanwhile, just make sure, and you're actually as an owner entitled to actually increase the sum insured if you're not happy, by the way. That's very important. So there's actually a blank column in that schedule, which is set for that reason. You are quite entitled to say, well, actually, I retiled mine. I put laminate flooring throughout, very expensive imported laminate flooring for that matter, and I didn't like the standard finished cupboards. I've gutted my place. I was watching too much TV, and I really love flip a property type program, and so I thought I would refurb my place out. I was motivated, and you might have spent a good 500,000 refurbing. Who knows? So add that to your sum insured, and you will be charged for that extra bit of cover, but it's really cheap. I think 10 rand per 100,000 rand per month is very cheap insurance for that valuable asset.
We are taking your questions and comments at home this evening as we explore the importance of replacement values and valuation and making sure that you're on top of things, especially for those of us who probably live or are investing in sectional title communities. And we are taking your questions and comments. As I said, I wanted to find out from you at home if you've ever had issues with an insurance claim that relates to your property where it wasn't paid out. What was the claim for, and what did the insurer give as the reason for not making the payment? We've got a comment coming through on Facebook from Andrika Lechanyane saying it's always important to know what you are and not covered for. Personally, I've never had any issues. Read your policy documents. And this is, I think this is one of those things. So many of us always just agree. I've read the terms and conditions, as opposed to actually reading those line items. And I've confessed that I quite hate admin, and I'm also one of those people who can very easily sort of accept the terms and conditions when you upgrade apps. But there's just certain products that when you buy them, you need to understand the terms and conditions. Your OTP is one of them. Your rental agreement is one of them. Certainly your insurance is another. When you're buying a car, you want to understand any kind of credit facility, especially stuff that you do with financial institutions. Make sure you understand the terms and conditions as much as possible. We've got a comment here coming from Howard Magatsane saying, without discarding the necessity of building insurance, and I'm confident every homeowner has one, I think that's the one type of cover which enjoys close to zero claims. I bet 99% of us in here has never claimed from building insurance. Raise your hand if you have ever. Mike, let's hear your take. I mean, how often? Let's hear from the insurer, from someone who does this daily.
Sorry, what was his name?
When we look at building, this is Howard Magatsane.
Howard, I want you as a client, please. You're my client. Okay.
Where you pay religiously, but we know that you don't quite claim.
No, okay. So I'll tell you now, Howard, quite honestly, in sectional title particularly, the claims are high. The typical expectation for premium versus claims is you should be, in order for your policy to run smoothly at the correct rate, etc., you would expect a claims ratio of between 35% and 55%. So that would say that insurance companies are generally paying out, call it half of the premium that they bring in claims. In fact, more than that, because 40% of premium actually goes towards costs, just to run the policy, have your broker available, all the staff that are in the background, and all of the reinsurance costs. So out of a premium of 100 Rand, 60 Rand goes towards paying claims, of which your body corporate, if you're in a body corporate, is probably using 40 Rand a year on that 100 Rand. That's the trend. If it's less, we try and get a lower premium for you, because that means there's space to bring your premium down. And if you're actually higher than 60%, the premium has to go up. So it's pretty balanced. I'd say it's fair to say that half of the premiums at least are being paid out in claims.
And Mark, I think one of the things that I certainly didn't want to ask you, you started answering it earlier, is around viewers at home who are now watching and getting a sense of how they just don't know whether whether it's their unit, individual unit, or certainly if they're living in an HOA or even the body corporate, if the entire, I'll say, property, so the estate, the building, whatever the case is adequately insured. What do they ask for when they ask the managing agent exactly? You've already, for example, pointed out that if it's between, let's say, 5,000 and maybe even up to 20,000 per square meter, depending on the nature of the property, that's probably fine. Anything lower than that, higher than that, you should probably, ask a few questions. But when we almost tomorrow, when we call our managing agent or we send them an email because we get a sense that we actually don't know the state of, the sectional title community that we're living in, what are we asking them for? And when we get it, what are we looking at?
Okay, so before I answer the question directly, I'm going to make a suggestion. What we try to do with our clients is we try to encourage the managing agent to invite owners to owner sessions. And some of our managing agent clients are very good with this. What they do, the one managing agent with the largest schemes arranges a Zoom meeting with me as the broker to talk to all of the owners that might be interested. There might be 500 owners in the scheme, and maybe 100 pitch up for the Zoom meeting, and then we go through some of the things that are covered and aren't covered, and people can raise their questions. We call that an informal insurance information session. Some of the managing agents do that for their clients, all of their clients. So that managing agent might look after 50 buildings or 50 complexes. I don't like to refer to clients as buildings. The clients are people. And what they do is they invite all of the owners in all of their client schemes to a session, likewise, where myself may do a presentation. I often find myself sitting with Zelinda van der Merwe, who's been on these sessions before, and the two of us sometimes do sessions for Bodies Corporate individually. So that's a very good suggestion, because that brings your broker closer to your client. I also invite any owner in a scheme that we do to phone us. I'm happy to have a chat to anybody about their insurance. That's what your broker should be doing. They're actually getting paid to dispense that advice. Then just to be more directly answer your question, so yes, the valuation, put your hand up and ask for a copy of the valuation. And I think it's a nice thing for an owner to have. Get a copy of the valuation of the whole building and keep it on file at home. Even if it's just a PDF copy, I mean, it's not taking up space. So, it's maybe a few, bytes on your computer. Save it somewhere, important documents file for my building, and have it on record that you've got the valuation. The schedule of replacement values, as I mentioned, you can glance at it. If the schedule looks funny, in other words, it doesn't look like it's been set out professionally, it looks like it's just a photocopy of the page from the policy, then put your hand up and say, listen, I'm not happy with the schedule. I'd prefer to know more about it. Can the broker perhaps contact me tomorrow and discuss it, or can we discuss this a bit further? I think that's probably what you can do as a starting point without, being too aggressive. You can do it in a nice manner, but it's important. It's your asset. That is could be your biggest asset that you earn, and maybe that you're ever going to earn, or one of your important assets. Make sure that it's properly covered. As I said, 10 Rand per 100,000 per month. It's relatively low cover to make sure that you're properly insured. And then, as I said, if you're not attending the AGM or you can't for any reason, you can always ask for the information, and it's in your pack anyway.
Mm-hmm. Well, Mike, I think before I let you go, any final tips for viewers and Robs? I think the very big takeaway is, you can be proactive, especially in the event where you maybe have not been, one of those people who either attends AGMs or attends some of the owner info sessions. But before that, let me actually squeeze in this question that's just come in from Facebook. Uluyanda Makwaka asking, should the body corporate have their own separate replacement value assessment done for each and every unit besides the owner one evaluations?
It's a very good question. It not if you've got a typical scheme. So if you've got, I'm thinking of the one I'm in. So if your buildings are fairly recently built, I say over the last 5-10 years even, and the finishes are pretty much all the same, your valuer will do a sampling. He will actually usually ask, can I just see inside one? And he gets an idea of the finishes. And in one of the things he actually states in the valuation document is that the value rate per square meter that I alluded to earlier is actually based on the standard finish of the developer. Now, if you've done those extra finishes, you can actually request that when the valuer comes around, that he does an extra inspection on your property, and you might pay a little bit extra for that. So it's actually much cheaper because you're not calling him out, especially on a call out. So instead of you being charged 3,000 Rand, you might be charged a couple of extra 100 Rand for him to do a little check-in and a little extra sheet on your particular property. So yes, you can. You can actually ask a valuer in. If you're a high-end property, and I'm talking, you've built your house and you've done it yourself and you feel you're not sure what the replacement value is, I highly recommend. So you might have a house which you spent building, probably maybe it cost you 3 million Rand, 4 million Rand, including your plot, and you've built this house in an estate. Well, get a valuer in to come and value it for you, because maybe the actual replacement cost is not what you managed to do it for, but to get it replaced by contractors, outside contractors, might cost you 5 million. So, it's really worth spending a few thousand Rand, a couple of thousand Rand on having that valuation done by an independent. And there's some real great valuers out there. One of them was recently on your show the other day. Get them in.
Well, Mike, that's a great place to leave it at this evening. Thank you so much for joining us as usual.
Yeah, thank you.
And that is Mike Addison, who's an owner at Addsure. I do hope that has answered your insurance questions. We're, of course, back again tomorrow evening at 7 p.m. and we'll be leaving you in the capable hands of award-winning farmer Umbali Nwoko with the Farming Podcast at 8 p.m. Until then, hoping you're staying home and staying safe.